I am Joshua K. Sabra, Esquire, and he is Dr. Miles Salisbury. And you are listening to the Miles Ahead podcast, where we share tactics, techniques, and protocol to improve your physical, mental, and spiritual health while you walk the path of the warrior. Stay tuned. On today's episode, Dr. Miles and I discuss the concept of delusion, both self-delusion and delusion to the process. And we go deep on where this comes from and how we can circumnavigate that. So a lot of fun stuff in this episode. Stay tuned. And we're back.
That was fast.
Yes, we are. I'm excited. This is the third and final installment of our 3-part series. And also we're gonna have some call to actions in this episode, so that you, the listener, can benefit. And if you want to deepen your level of self-awareness around some of these issues and have a nice outline of what problem areas you need to focus on, so that you can create better health outcomes and for yourself and your the people around you, because when you're healthier, everyone around you is happier because you're happier.
You'll rub off on them, probably.
That's right.
Just like you will if you're going the other direction.
Exactly right. The work you don't do becomes everyone else's problem. So, it's a different week, Miles. What are you listening to?
God damn it. Listen, I never prepared. I don't know. Let's go with podcasts, since that's really what I mostly listen to. I'm listening to Lane Norton on the Huberman Lab podcasts, catching up on his. That's up your alley. The old Lane Norton, he's amazing. Some of those guys, like we were talking about this in the lifting earlier, with people that we listen to that are just kind of always, you can just trust them by the way they sort of are always in integrity, and what they say and how they behave is pretty much the same dude. And like, he's one of those guys. Huberman's one of those guys. Jocko. You just feel like, okay, I can trust this guy, Peter Attia. And also because they really know how to parse apart data, because they're freaking doctors and PhDs and researchers. They know how to interpret data, know how to see if the methodology section was bunk or not. And so, like, Lane Norton is funny because he'll go on and, like, some influencer will throw out some N of one thing, and he'll just tear it to shreds with, like, here's the data saying the opposite, or this methodology section was flawed, and blah blah. It's like, thank you for doing that. It's like a public service, because I know how to do that because of my training, but most people don't know how to look at a study and understand any of these things. So they hear influencers say that eating human feces can, raise your testosterone by 43, and they'll just start eating human feces, or whatever idiot example you want to use. I don't know why I thought of that. Maybe from remember that back in the U-biome thing, where people were, like, swallowing capsules of fecal matter to get good gut bacteria. Remember that scam?
I know a guy who sells it. Yeah,
there's still that. I think maybe there's some good data, but there's a whole scam around that. That kind of shit pisses me off too. Like, making money off literally crap. So I'm listening to Lane Norton right now on Huberman. That was the longest answer to your question I think I've had on this podcast. So apologies.
No,
that's called ADD for all you folk out there.
Well, we could do a whole podcast on Lane Norton. Ironically, I have probably the most in common with Lane Norton than I do with almost any influencer that I know of.
Like, personally?
Mm-hmm. He's
awesome.
Very, he's a champion master's level power lifter. He's an expert in nutrition. He's an expert in many things physiological. He is motivated to a pathological level around injustice, specifically falsehoods.
Yeah.
And again, I love Lane for who he is, but I do feel like he struggles to sleep at night for a variety of reasons that are not character issues, but there's things that bother him to a pathological level, as I said.
Like he's triggered sometimes by some of these things.
Yeah. And he's even said, I don't get paid for this. Yes, I use it as content, but staying up to
Make a video.
I think I propagated probably 5 or 10 of his best posts and long form blogs. His picture perfect evisceration of forks over knives.
Oh, did you go after that guy?
He just went line by line, went on the claims, and probably the most important claim the most important articulation of the issue with that movie is the gorilla and them like building muscle and protein and grass. And he in one of his points that he makes on that movie, it's like, well, a gorilla's 400 pounds and eats however much bamboo or whatever that the frickin' gorilla eats, or grass, or I don't know what gorillas
eat. Fuck they're eating, bark dust.
And he's like, if you had the proteins in your gut biome that made viable amino acids out of chitin and other plant material, then it would be the equivalent of you eating 400 grams of protein per day. Because if you eat that much grass and you were a freaking cow, that's how much protein they're getting from the grass.
Due to their gut.
Due to their multiple stomachs and gut biomes that they have bacteria in them that allow them.
So you're saying you can just put shit in a capsule and we can swallow it and then we can eat like a gorilla?
I think if you had a gorilla's gut biome, you might die. But the point is that the gorilla is getting 400 grams of protein from that.
That's
plant.
Just the method that their bodies have evolved to do. And we're trying to compare gorillas to humans because we're both primates.
Well, they're talking about protein, muscularity, diet, plant-based diet.
And let's face it, gorillas are fucking jacked.
The gorillas are jacked. And if you weigh 400 pounds, but you also had 400 grams of protein per day, you also would be jacked. And you just used your arms to locomote.
Truth.
If you're walked on your arms, you would be a fucking monster.
My low back would hurt like a motherfucker, but yes.
But Lane Norton's great, and he's worth listening to. He's very technical, and his long story short, I could probably build a YouTube channel just on summarizing his 144 page dissertations into 1 page.
So you could do a service to the world too, like he does.
That's right.
It also means he needs to come on the podcast if you guys are kindred spirits.
But he's quite metal. He's got a sordid, not a sordid past, but a sordid present. And I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Are you a messy bitch? We're friends.
We're still working it out.
So I'm glad that you're listening to Lane Norton. I'm
on Huberman, which is a great podcast.
Yeah, on Huberman.
He just had someone on named Martha Beck who I'd never heard of. She was fucking awesome. Oh my God. Just in my field, had no idea. I'm going to go back and read all her books. I love that he brings on people in my space, like James Hollis. That guy was great. He's lectured at my university 3 times. I saw him here in Portland once. Did you listen to that one? He's so good. I went to get my book signed at the end, and I was like fanboy nervous, and I like locked up, and I was like shaking, and he was also shaking and quiet, and like we both looked at each other like, oh, we're both massive introverts. And then we calmed down. And I asked my own therapist later at the time, he's also a Jungian therapist and knows something. He's like, oh yeah, he's a big time introvert. On stage, he just talks and it's all good. But you get us like out of context, like in the interpersonal space, the introvert comes out. So that explained that. But Huberman is great because he's starting to bring a lot more of the psychological mental health space people to go along with the biological, which makes a lot of sense because it's all one system.
Well, and they're so connected, right? The feedback that we're getting, which we're going to talk about today, good segue into I'm listening to James Woodmore, The Power of Words, which it's in the last episode he did, where he spends about an hour talking about the impact of our words on our world, how they're the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind. Really, really impactful. But speaking of words in our mental pictures and the mental and the mind-body connection in terms of how we are getting feedback from what we're doing. Today's topic, we're continuing the problem with men, problem 3 of 3. We talked about masculinity and empathy and self-awareness in episode 1.
Self-prioritization.
Self-prioritization and lack thereof. Talked about aging and hormones, episode 2.
Poor sleep, good sleep.
And then today we're going to talk about delusion. And problems 1 and 2 connect with problem 3 because the delusion, which is the distance between what is going on in their physical world and what you believe is going on in the physical world, that's your level of delusion. All of us have some level of delusion.
Mm-hmm. You could bring in a sort of cognitive dissonance as another example. It's not, that's delusion is going further, but yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I don't know, this is your area of expertise, so you can describe it for us, but I think there's like a Venn diagram overlap. So like, I don't know if you've had this experience about being deluded, but have you ever like come home, been working on a project, been moving things around the house, and then you come out for dinner, and then you see this like trail of debris that you yourself have left of like, oh, my backpack I just left in the foyer, and like my shoes I just took off like right here, and like unless you're Mr. Rogers and you have a process for everything, but what I've noticed is like if I'm hyper focused on something, I literally can't see the mess I'm making or what's going on. Like, oh, I could just put that away, or there's already stuff in the kitchen. Like it takes 1 second to just like move things around, clean the kitchen so the kitchen's clean when you leave. But I literally cannot see it when I'm in another mode or another task. And so I'm deliberately, inputs are not entering in my space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say deliberately, it's not deliberate, but it's part of the mode that I'm in. And to me, that's a little bit of delusion of like, I literally cannot see what is going on in my environment.
Like a lack of mindfulness.
When I slow down, that presence expands and I can see more of what's going on.
Yeah, you're going too fast. Yeah. Delusion in our field is more like highly irrational beliefs that you double down to go into, and maybe you're getting the form of like psychosis where that's a whole nother level where.
Well, let's zoom into that because I disagree. I believe it's a spectrum.
Oh, everything's a spectrum.
So if you and I are sitting in we're having a conversation with a third party,
mm-hmm.
and then they leave, and you go, "This guy was really mean to me," right? And I'll be like, "What do you mean?" Mm-hmm. Well,
that's just projection.
He criticized, this or that. I was like, he told you were talking a little too loud, right?
But that's mean.
Your experience of it, right? We're having different perceptions, different levels of delusion,
and our own interpretations and belief systems about ourselves.
Being too close to a topic mm-hmm. is one way of being able to delude yourself. Yeah. Being too distant is another way of.
That's a good way to name the spectrum, actually. And cognitive dissonance is like knowing something's one thing and then saying the opposite, or half knowing something and saying the opposite, or unwilling to acknowledge truth and say the opposite.
One of the things that as a mark of intelligence, right, when people can be self-aware without being grandiose or overly critical. And when and this is why we really appreciate people who have the ability to have a foot in both worlds. So if you're in the political sphere and you can criticize the actions you yourself are taking or a part of without being an apologist or
humble brag.
Yeah. And so it's just like having a sense of knowing what it is that you're saying and the pros and the cons of that, and being a little bit objective. Now, I don't think there's such a thing as purely objective, but
oh, there's a philosophical rabbit hole right there.
But for the purposes of this conversation, we want to be we want to have as clear as we can quantitative metrics for our behaviors and qualitative outputs. So for health, I want to know how many hours I've slept. I don't want my opinion about the hours that I've slept or how hard I'm working on sleep. How many hours did you sleep? You should be able to know, oh, I slept 7 hours last night.
Quantitatively, because of my Oura ring said X, Y, and Z.
Or just looking at the clock. Like, it didn't have to be sophisticated. I went to bed at 11 o'clock last night, which is late for me. And I slept in till 7, which is also late for me. But I enjoy an extra hour of late morning sleep because I tend to get more REM in the late morning.
You do, yeah. That's when we get the best REM, is if you can add an extra half an hour. But you don't be careful of the social jet lag thing we talked about, which is more like 2-3 hours. 1 hour variance isn't really going to do much to your sleep.
So the piece is, I'm not delusional about how much sleep I got. Now, I'm fully quantitatively, like, how tired you are is subjective.
Qualitative, yeah.
And that's okay. You want to have subjective measurements too.
Mm-hmm. Direct felt experience.
But the more quantitative metrics you have and stick to, that's why So, okay. First, let's talk about delusion and how it's a problem with everyone, and specifically how it's a problem with men. So all of us have some degree of delusion about how hard we're working, how much we're working, how hard we're not working. So like, people have ego about working hard. People have aversions to working hard. People have addictions to working hard. People have addictions to work and also addictions to sleep, or we're sleep avoidant. But all of us have some level of delusion about what is exactly happening in our own lives. And part of that is accidental, and part of that is
protective, perhaps.
Protective.
Mm-hmm. From the truth.
I was texting with a friend of mine about a few things, and we were talking about health, and he's struggling to lose weight and take ownership of his health. And I revealed to him about my, diet, which again, I've told everyone who will listen that I am on a diet.
That barista really knows
exactly
day by day.
My postman and my barista are experts at my diet now. But but one of the things that I found fascinating is when I started to not use food and alcohol as coping mechanisms, I became more aware of everything in my life. And back to the level of delusion, like my closet, my laundry, like everything started to clean up. My budget, my business, like everything started to clean up when I stopped numbing out and avoiding the emotional hangover of the decisions I was making on a daily basis.
Yep.
So delusion goes down, awareness goes up. Now, again, it's never 100-100. It's never perfectly congruent with
1-to-1
with what is going on in reality, but you want to be as close to reality as you can. So for this conversation, what we want to know, we need to know that for men, if you are aware of your own, if I am aware of my own way that I relate to myself, because like every boy, I was enculturated to not cry and whine and whimper. I was also enculturated not to complain. That was something that my mom did to me, because we had to move around so much and we were in such an emergency situation for so long that she was managing her own stuff and she didn't want to manage my emotional needs, which is perfectly understandable. But the consequence of that was I stopped narrating how I felt about things. So with nobody to comfort me, including myself, I just started to ignore the negative emotions or positive emotions that would come up. Now, this has many second, third order, fourth order consequences.
Of course.
Because the emotions are the messenger that something is incongruent with what we want.
It's a symptom signal.
And so if you're a typical dude, then you already know you've been coached and you've been enculturated to not emote. And there are tons of consequences to that. There's consequences in your bank account. There's consequences in your blood pressure. There's consequences around your waist. There's consequences in your relationships. The consequences are for everyone else and you.
Connor Beaton calls it being emotionally constipated.
That's right. So you're emotionally constipated and you're trying to get in shape. You're doing a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. Now the delusion comes into play. The delusion is 50% what you're doing, right? Because if you're not aware of all of the consequences to your actions, you become inoculated or insulated from the actions themselves, and you start to think that that's just the environment and what's going on. You stop looking at how many hours you sleep, whether or not you actually got all your training sessions in, skipping meals, all these quantitative things just sort of blur into this background of things like aggravating statistics, or uncomfortable data points. The other half of the delusion is what you actually have to do to change. And we are so misled. If you've seen Instagram videos or YouTube videos, these are the 10 foods that keep you fat, that keep your cortisol high, that keep your, these will spike your blood sugar.
And here are my supplements that you can buy that are
100%
herbal shit.
V-Shred. The V-Shred guy. Total, utter nonsense. Like hints of truth labeled with like pop science bullshit on top of it. And things that you are intuitively already afraid of or want to believe. That there's some, like, gluten is keeping you fat, or that some secret blood marker is the reason why that you have a gene that is screwing up your fitness progress.
You got obese genes.
Yeah. And there are genes that affect your metabolism. There are genes that affect your sensitivity to alcohol. Mark Manson has 2 of them.
Interesting.
And he was double positive for a couple of different problematic genes for metabolism. And he found it very difficult. It took him 4 years to lose 60 pounds. And it's a significant accomplishment. And 4 years isn't too long a time to do that. But it was very difficult. And he was also an alcoholic and found that his alcoholism had many, many, many more effects than just the weight.
Just the sugars.
Yeah, than just the calories. There was a lot going on there.
Sleep disruption. Yeah.
Exactly. Sleep, relationships, all these things.
It's very weird how behaviors and environment upregulate genetics that you might not have had express. I mean, it's this whole epigenetics conversation. Like if he had never had touched alcohol, would he have ever struggled with these genes? It's a mystery.
Right. So we're delusional about what we're doing. And we also delude ourselves into thinking that or delusion. We delude ourselves into like what steps are it's only going to take me 3 months to get in shape. It's only going to take, I just need to quit the drinking or, quit the sugar or do some more cardio. These are all things that are impactful and will have an impact. But I think of every significant skill, going to sleep on time, meal prep, getting consistent exercise, tracking macros, all those are 5% of the equation, right? And they create this larger puzzle or like this larger tapestry of skills that create the work of art that is you. But not one of them is I don't think there isn't a magic bullet for most of us. And
I wish.
I think part of the delusion is that if we find this magical thing, it won't be hard.
Ah, yes.
It won't be work.
The struggle and adversity avoidance. Yeah.
So
if you think of most things that are worth doing in life, there's a little bit of adversity involved.
Oh, there's a ton of it. The most adversity that we face is from ourselves. It's from the environment that we set up around ourselves. It's from the people we hang out with, the media we consume, the pattern of life that we establish that we then blame for the poor results that we
project onto those
Yes.
things. Yes.
That's right. And we integrate, we have to tease apart ideas that we've integrated. And I'll give you an example. So when I started to get serious on diet about 4 months ago, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to have wine and cheese, which I love, both of those things, with my girlfriend, who I also love, who also loves those things.
Conflict of interest.
Well, in my mind, I think previously I'd tied our time together was dependent upon the activity.
And if you didn't do that, then you were going to be separated somehow or distant.
Well, I just wasn't very thoughtful about the execution of it, because when I decided to change my diet, I committed to her that I was like, hey, babe, like, I want to spend time with you. I want to watch TV with you. You know, sometimes I want to be in this nightly conversation together, but I just won't be able to have the wine and the cheese. So she still makes the cheese board, but she just makes less of it. And she has a glass of wine and I have a LaCroix, right?
There we go.
And, you know,
LaCroix.
And when I first started, I would like smoke cigars, and I'd had to do non-calorie things with my hands. I had to like do things to keep engaged. Like the closer I got to quiet and connection, the more aggravated I got.
That's fascinating, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what was coming up.
Oh, I mean, all kinds of things. I mean, to this day, it still work. And I still feel hungover a little bit from the change.
Yeah. That's normal. It'll catch up to your conscious mind at some point. But a lot of stuff with trauma, especially with EMDR, you're going to go through it, and then you're going to experience life differently and feel things differently. And it's going to be odd. And your rational mind's like 10 steps behind, but it'll catch up. It'll make rational sense out of it at some point.
Yeah. Well, I'm here for it. And when the delusion was that changing my diet was going to change my relationship. But the truth is that I could commit to the relationship and change the diet.
You can have your cake and eat it too.
So I think the language piece is really important. We want to use the Harvard answer for everything,
which is
when students are applying to Harvard, a question on their FAQ on their website was, is it more important to have a perfect 4.0 or is it more important to have extracurriculars? And the staff said, well, I know we're supposed to say academics, but the truth is it's both. You need to have a 4.0 and you need to have good extracurriculars. And meaning that it's the Harvard answer is always, you're going to need everything. So it's yes and. So when we're using that on ourselves, a lot of times people think that like, I don't have the time to get in shape and build my business. We're actually going to need you to get in shape to build your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have enough time to be in shape and be a good parent. It's going to require that you be a good example and you be a good parent.
Dude, yeah, I just saw something on Instagram. Damn it, I hate saying that. But it was, I don't know, I think it was legit, but it was talking about men, especially men. If your kids see you working out, it sort of sets them up for being people that work out and take care of their health and exercise in the future. If you're consistently showing them, I'm a kind of person that works out, they take that in and they become, it becomes important to them. I mean, this is probably a phenomenon across the board for everything, but that was just one thing that they were highlighting.
That's right. So the delusion is, there's so many delusions that we don't have time to list them all, but we delude ourselves onto our own behaviors. So a simple thing is like, if you think you're an active person, put on a freaking $12 pedometer and like monitor your steps over the course of a week and look at what your step count actually is. And I say this because, when I got my Apple Watch, I was like, I work out every day. Actually, it's 3 times a week.
That's a delusion. Yeah.
That's a delusion.
Yeah.
Right. I knew I had a 4-day workout per week program. that I would do some weeks, and some weeks I would only do 3. And, and I thought it averaged out to 4 times a week. No, I was wrong. And my step count was like, 7,000 or 14,000, but that's a big swing. What is it? That's a 100% swing in one direction, right? So the greater your transparency and accountability, the less delusion that you have.
So we have the quantitative and qualitative necessity here. Qualitatively, we got to track it, and quantitatively, we can check in to see how we feel about ourselves and how we look in the mirror. But more crucially, to fight the delusion is the quantitative aspect of like what gets measured gets done. Is
That's
that
right.
what you're saying? Yeah.
That's right. And what I'm going to do is, I think in our show notes today, I'll give people, we'll give them PDF to ask questions. And I'll also give you a copy of this biofeedback form that I use on my students, my clients. And all of these things that we're talking about, it's like, what are they, subjective and objective, strength training, calories, macros, protein, energy, sleep, all those things. Do you track them all every day? No. But every week you have a wrap up, a recapitulation of the week, and you understand what your baseline is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can track the change. Because if it's all 5s, I sleep great, I got great, appetite and great digestion.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then you're in amazing shape. What do you need me for?
Totally. Yeah. That's the delusion tracker right there.
Right. So we want to decrease the delusion. We increase self-awareness. You do those through, internal processes, self-awareness, mindfulness, external prompts. So you have like mechanisms, like you go to the gym, you have some sort of benchmarks that you look at. You have goals for your food that you hit every week. I do 3 meals a day with 40 grams of protein per meal, whatever.
And you're tracking it, like with the Carbon app with Lane Norton, and you use the Apple Watch, I use the Oura Ring, and like levels that we were talking about earlier. That's another good one for your glucose.
And when you start to actually pay attention, what you start to realize is that you're not perfect. Not only are you not perfect, you're not even in alignment with what you think is even happening, which is good.
It's very good.
That means that you can start to stretch out the goal. Instead of having to have this solved by the end of the month or end of the season, you can say, all right, I want to have my eating program under control in the next 6 weeks. I want to have my fitness program dialed in the next 12 weeks. You start to stretch out, and like you want to see these pillars start to get in place in your life.
Much less stressful too.
That's right. Because you're actually navigating with the real numbers, not your emotional interpretation of what they should be or shouldn't be.
Mm.
So what most people die on the hill of is they are managing their response to the data, not the data. They're numbing to avoid the response. They're avoiding the actual, their actual emotions around these things, instead of just fucking changing the inputs, which is changing your behavior. So your level of delusion on the inside is one thing. The level of delusion on the outside is everything to do with the time frame you're talking about, the metrics you even care about. There's only 5 big inputs to your overall quality of life. Huberman calls them the 5 inputs which allow you to context shift, which means be present. His fucking robotic way of saying be present. But your exercise, your sleep, your nutrition, your mental hygiene with your own self-talk, and your breath work, or how you breathe.
Interesting.
I think those are the pillars that he mentioned. And I probably wouldn't add anything to that. I would probably say that's
relationships and spirituality. Dad.
There you go. Yeah. So who you're spending your time with and what you're talking about. So level of delusion, you want to decrease the level of delusion about what it takes those 5 things plus what Miles just added. And it takes the internal work of actually paying attention to what really is. And those things all take time and energy and attention. And you don't have to hire a freaking personal trainer to wake you up in the morning and do this stuff with. You can,
Could be fun.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to my my website. But really, what you want to do is you want to become self-accountable and self-led.
Self-led. There it is.
And that is a practice. That's a skill that I'm working on.
We all working on that one.
What would you add to the delusion conversation, Miles?
Well, being self-led, I think of it through the internal family systems lens of that's what we're trying to do, trying to get wounded parts to trust you so they can stop hijacking and taking over. And you being self-led from your highest self, and you're never going to get that perfect. I think if you get that right, you're fucking enlightened. Like, I think that's what it means. You're walking around being self-led 100% of the time, you're probably enlightened, but good luck with that. I think there would be like 5 humans ever to do that. Jesus, Buddha,
Eckhart Tolle.
Muhammad, Eckhart Tolle. Maybe. I mean, the way the guy talks, maybe. But yeah, more into the delusion. We got to go back to the ego, right? Ego's the enemy. If it's trying to be the master, that's where delusion lives, is in the ego. Another piece is around self-sabotage. We do this a lot. You've probably seen this over and over with people you're working with. I've heard Connor Beaton talk about it, and it's a means of self-sabotage as a means of control, like to control for something. You want to keep the status quo the same when you're trying to change, or maybe you're starting to get on your fitness journey and your spouse is not. And it's sort of like them with you and your girlfriend, the cheese plate. It's like, well, if I get healthier, she's kind of saying weird crap about me now and like complaining about it. And like, oh, I better not change too much because she's not. So let me just go back to the way I was. And you might not be a full unconscious process. You might unconsciously do that, or consciously. That shows up a lot of different ways, but sometimes the main way to maintain a sense of control over something. And that's where you got to do your own shadow work, internal work, unconscious work. Why am I going for this goal and then shooting myself in my feet every time? Or whatever version of that occurs to you. But I'd imagine that, it shows up in my space in psychotherapy quite a bit. And it's easier to talk about because that's what we're trying to do. I imagine it's harder in personal training when it shows up because everyone thinks, oh, it's about the inputs we're talking about. I just bench this and I eat this food. And they're not really aware of how they're self-sabotaging. Do you find that's true?
So the danger with true ego, true shadow stuff is that it doesn't seem like a choice when it happens. So as a person who is raised by a borderline personality and who has a codependent relationship or had a codependent relationship with their mom, like when my mom would get into an emergency or something would happen with her health or she would need something, it wouldn't feel like a choice. Like I would be in the middle of like working on an important project for me. Mm-hmm. And then I'd be like, oh no, I have to go. Yeah. I have to do this. Yep. It's endemic to who I am to solve this problem for someone else. Yeah. And anyone from the outside, it would seem strange.
Of course.
Like, really? You have to go drive out to like bumfuck Egypt so you can give your, mom a ride to the doctor. She can't take an Uber or whatever. Mm-hmm. And to some people who might say like, well, yeah, it's your mom. You have to do it, whatever it takes for your mom. Right? Of course. So when the true self-sabotage comes up, it doesn't seem like a choice, and it doesn't even seem like you're generating it. If it's really well executed, it will seem like it is a character flaw to not engage. And that's been my experience, where the need to be right, the need to be liked, there's some sort of betrayal that has to happen in order for you to actually transcend the ego and self-sabotage, because it's not as simple as like I'm in a conflict with my boss, so I went out and get drunk and I quit my job the next day or whatever. Sometimes it is, but that's usually much less functional, much more end stage psychosis in problems that occur. But I think a good ego problem is going to be subtle, and will not seem like something that you have control over, couldn't even opt out of.
That's shadow stuff. Yeah. Some stuff you've maybe suppressed, repressed. And it's upbringing stuff. And it's all you knew growing up, right? So the outside observer they'd see that and go, yeah, that's weird. But you're like, no, that's just what I do. If you're enmeshed.
Well, and it's that there are levels of yeah, enmeshed is exactly right. All those things are true. And on the surface, like, first of all, it's compassionate, right?
It masquerades as compassion. Yeah.
It's like if you have a homeless family member or somebody who's in and out of rehab or whatever, to not pick up the phone when they call, people are like, well, they need you. Well, they need a lot of things, right? You're not all things to all people. And if it's ever a choice between you or living on the street and or going hungry, that person made a lot of poor decisions in a row to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks your heart to be that person who has to ignore a cousin or a family member or mom or a dad or a brother or a sister who's in that situation.
To hold a boundary.
But a lot of Americans are in that situation. A lot of humans are in that situation to hold a boundary, right? And it seems, if you haven't gone through it from the outside looking in, it might be viewed as too dispassionate.
It's enabling otherwise. Buddhism is kind of a funny term. They call this idiot compassion. It's basically compassion with no wisdom. It's like going and giving the homeless person $100. Like, oh, I did something good. Well, I mean, did you? You might have just made their addiction worse. I mean, I'm generalizing. Instead of like giving them food or, hey, let's get you off drugs. Let me get you into treatment. Okay, there's compassion with wisdom. But just without the wisdom, it's kind of ignorant compassion, idiot compassion. I think it's hilarious that they call it that. We got to be careful of that. And sometimes we grow up instilled with that's just the move. We enable the nice guys, the caretakers. They're doing idiot compassion over and over and over, and then not noticing they're harming themselves and that person. No one's getting better here. There's no wisdom.
Yeah.
Got the compassion part down, but no wisdom.
Yeah. Well, you have to experience it, I think, to know the difference, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's hard when you're stuck just doing the codependent compassion, quote unquote, thing, because you get enmeshed and you think, talk about delusion, you're just stuck in this weird, soupy psychological mess. But then when you start to zoom out and have boundaries and it stops seeming like a betrayal and actually, oh, I feel like I have a sense of self for once. There is a separation between me and you. Then things start to change. There's some wisdom growing there.
And, a less dramatic version of this for the listener is like, if you're a guy and you're delusional and you don't know that these are all stories, they're going to come up in something that's very important to you and also innocuous. Like, oh, I got a work sprint coming up. I have to help this. I got to teach one of my subordinates how to do a thing. And I want to be a good leader, and it's always around service. And this is the head of household burden.
Very sneaky.
All leaders have this. Well, I have to because of my commitment to the team, the mission,
in order to avoid and self-sabotage.
Yeah, but that's not the language. So it takes a sophisticated. You have to earn trust to be able to say that. Like, so I think a good. There's probably a prompt for our PDF downloadable, but it's like, what does self-sabotage look like in your world? What is the it's not the golden shadow, but it's like the golden self-sabotage. Like it's like it's an act of service that's really an embodiment of problem one.
It masquerades.
Lack of self-prioritization.
Yes.
So over-functioning, things like that. So these are the things, right? So delusion is you will not know that it's happening when it's happening, which is why you have to be accountable to people outside of you, and include myself in that. Mm-hmm. So, having a strong community, having a wonderful girlfriend, these are all things I've relied heavily on over the years. And it's feather slap brick in that when people start asking you questions like, basic financial questions and you don't know the answer, and instead of just saying, I don't know what that is, that's the feather, right? When people are dropping hints that like, oh, hey, like, what is your Do you have an IRA? You have a 401k plan?
What's your portfolio looking like these days?
Yeah. And like when you're in your 30s and you've never even heard that term before, and you're, instead of saying like, ignoring it is like the rookie move, asking more questions is the better move. The slap is when you are 40 and you don't know, like you don't even have a savings plan. You have no retirement plan. And you have to have a multifaceted approach, because not that you still can't save at 40, you're still young at 40, but it's going to look different.
It's like trying to get fit at 65 when you never have.
And the brick is, you have to retire because you get hurt and now you can't work. And now you have Social Security, which is whatever that is. And you didn't have enough time to generate something for yourself. So now you're,
it's harder.
Yeah. You're having to make different decisions.
Which gets into the next bit that I was going to talk about with this category is patience.
Yeah.
That's hard to apply at this point. But in this process, patience is super important. And it's counterintuitive in the age of Instagram and Amazon orders showing up.
Let's put some teeth to that. Patience is short-term pain that you endure immediately and you learn to love. And my metaphor for this is boxing, because a patient boxer actually has to sit in the pocket and take punches and move and work and roll, because if you're not in the pocket, you're not in range to do anything.
Can't affect change.
So you can't have any impact. So patience isn't standing there waiting for something to happen. You actually have to.
You're engaging.
You have to engage.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's not producing immediate results. It's actually taking a punch.
You're taking, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put teeth to this. Yeah, it's not just sitting there and one day, I'm being really patient. One day it'll happen. No, you're doing things, but you're not expecting it to be an Amazon delivery.
You have the certainty of an Amazon delivery and the patience of a farmer.
Interesting.
Like, that the crop will arrive, but it's going to take a year or 2 or 5 to grow.
There's no overnight delivery on this one, more than likely. Remember AOL and dial-up speed and all that sound? Remember having to I'm going to check my email, and then you'd go make a sandwich and come back, and then your email would pop up. Like now, if that doesn't happen in 2 seconds, I want to punt my phone. I've lost touch with that patience. Totally. We're so spoiled with that speed. And so I think we try to apply that speed to this realm with fitness, and it just is not going to work. There's no freaking way. Maybe you get newbie gains is the closest you could get to this phenomenon, but that's still a long time.
And it's a way of life. And when I first, to bring it back to me, which is my favorite topic, when I first started to really get clean and actually get into the final 4 months of this transformation that I've been on, when I shifted around my diet, cut out the booze, and got strict on calories and started to go down to, very lean amounts, it was such a small adjustment at first, but it was such a large psychological adjustment, because it was I think it was at 3,000 calories a day and I went down to 2,500. 2,500 is not a small amount of food. It's not even a sacrifice, right? You're eating 4 meals a day, 4 good sized meals. But just that cut, I started to feel I started to get headachy, because my day starts so early and my workouts are early. And so my calories were all front loaded, and I stopped eating around 6 p.m., which is not late. That's a normal.
That's normal. I used to live in Spain. That's normal.
Right. And so, but that change, I felt a headache for 10 days.
Something like a withdrawal almost.
It was like a withdrawal of many things, right? Because I was drinking less. I wasn't abstinent. I hadn't been abstinent this whole time of alcohol or sugar or anything like that, but I just started to cut everything down and be more precise.
I wonder if it's something to do with your insulin response too.
Could have been a bunch of things. I was going through a lot at the time. And, but I had this headache, and after about 2 weeks, it went away. And then it came back here at the very end of the diet when I hit my lowest calorie numbers. I got down to 1,800 calories or something, 1,700 calories. And at my lowest, I started to feel that headachy kind of fatigue feeling come back, but it was like an echo of that first change.
Yeah. Do you feel brain fog at all during this whole thing?
Just at the beginning and just at the end.
Just the end, same thing. Okay.
But it had been I'd become adapted to it. And so now it was just so much more manageable. And I also had recognized, I was like, oh, I remember this. And I was like, I can still work and do things. And I just got a little extra sleep and it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the patience part of this is embracing the friction now so that you can have the results later, instead of removing the friction from your life now and the conflict so that you can have more pain later.
That's it. You want pain now, pleasure later, or pleasure now or pain later.
Small pain now.
That's it.
Big pleasure later.
Yep.
Small pleasure now. Big pain later.
Yeah. Which pain do you choose?
That's right.
It's going to be one of the first t-shirts that we make.
Love it.
Design around that.
I'm here for it. So ending the delusion, bringing in patience, and understanding that it's a way of life, not a workout of the day. It's like,
it's not a what?
It's not a what, it's a wool.
That's another t-shirt or a bumper sticker.
If
you know, you know.
That was a Martin Rooney quote.
Never mind.
It's not a what, it's a way of life.
Do I have to give credit then?
Absolutely. So, we want to empower you. We're going to provide some. Do you want to add more stuff to the delusion conversation? I mean, delusion is my favorite, probably one of my favorite topics, because we live in this ecosystem of our own creation, and we're trapped there.
It's true. Just to add to the patience, I was thinking about what helps you to get through the patience, and both the Dalai Lama and Jordan Peterson have said something similar of like, don't compare yourself to who you think you should be, compare yourself who you used to be, and you notice where you've grown, and it'll give you a little bit of like shot in the arm of like, oh, okay, I'm progressing. This is working. I don't have to expect to be this now. So what I'm doing, just trust the process. All the things we've talked about, tracking everything, and then your subjective, quantitative, qualitative, all that stuff.
The ego loves to say that nothing has ever changed.
Oh, yeah.
You used it at the beginning of the show, and I wrote it down. You said, you always ask, and I'm never prepared. Always and never, eh?
Absolutes. Yeah, if you're speaking in absolutes of the ego. Also, it's the way the Sith Lord speaks. If you're a Star Wars fan. Remember that?
Yeah. Sith.
Nerd out.
Oh, man.
Only a Sith speaks in absolutes.
Yeah. Well, exactly. There's no nuance. There's no humanity.
That's pretty much where we are in social media and the internet these days, too.
Well, it rage sells.
Unfortunately, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah. And I think to kind of wrap this conversation is that all of these delusions, the problems, the lack of self-prioritization, and the unconscious, dictum of the shadow, and us being manipulated by our fears and beliefs about ourselves that we don't even know, and blaming aging and hormones because we can see those, and that's intuitive, and that's what everyone does, and everyone complains about it. There's people around you that are quietly killing it. There are people around you who are in the best shape of their life, in the last half of their life. There's people around you that are making great money and enjoying their kids and enjoying their lives and have no drama or very little drama.
And quietly.
And they're not engaged with these nonsense, because at some point, we have to acknowledge that our obsession and our being enamored with all these problems is actually a placeholder for the results that we were trying to create in our life. All that energy that we put into becoming overly identified with this shit is just the energy that we could have been using to
actually do it,
build new skills.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, one of my clients, I should send her a text, but she was like, what's the difference between now and where you were at 6 months ago? And she's like, instead of scrolling through Instagram at 6 a.m., I'm working out at 6 a.m.
Dude, that's huge. Imagine that day in, day out. Either or, like pick one. Imagine your life day in, day out. one of those two paths. Where is that going to lead in 1 year?
That's right.
Huge.
That's right. So to help you end the delusion, we'll put it in our show notes today, and we'll leave them up on the podcast somewhere. The link to a PDF where you can figure out where you're at on these pieces, and another link to the biofeedback form so you can check in with yourself around where you're at with your health inputs. And if you don't know the answer to the questions on these and any of these things, then that means that you've been on a different conversation and you might have been focused on something that hasn't been serving you. So the goal isn't here to make you feel dumb. It's to make you feel smart.
Yes.
And to put you in the driver's seat for your own change. And if you are interested in going deeper with this, after helping a few men, including myself, I'm rolling out a men's transformation program. So it's going to be an 8-week program on how to implement all the stuff that I've helped a few men implement over the last few months that is specifically designed for guys who are like me in the back half of life, or like some of my clients, in their 50s and 60s. But it is to wind back the clock to specifically eliminate body fat, not to gain or lose weight, but to reduce body fat, body composition, or improve body composition by reducing body fat, increasing muscle tone. So how do you do that? There's many steps. And I think the first one is to download these documents and start to look at what you're actually doing that's meaningful. And the second would be to get on this free webinar that I have coming up on men and how they can turn their health around. Mm-hmm. So how to unblock your progress for men. We'll put a link to that webinar up as well so that you can become first in line to the program.
Boom. And push the add button and share button to anybody you think this would benefit. You got bros in your life, or women if you're listening, and you got husbands that are in this range, the dad bod going on, and you're like, I'm a little worried about you. Share these episodes. I think it will be helpful.
That's right. That's right. Share it with a man. And if you're listening and you're a man, continue to stay on the path of the warrior and bring forth the warrior within.
That's it. Women too. All right. Until next time, we're out.
Out.